And get started. I'm hoping David and Stephen will meet up with us again tonight. What I'm gonna hope is that I have started this in the proper place. We'll certainly see. But it looks like we're rolling okay. And I'll just keep an eye on the chat and see if anybody wants to hop in. So, okay. I actually have a little bit more. Let me see. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I've got about the same, or if not a little bit more, of a few sections that I found applicable and fascinating and challenging. So that's what I have this week. I'm going to try not to smack this mic around too much, but that's what I've got right now. I've got all kinds of stuff on sickness, virtue, suffering, and afflictions that really stuck out to me a lot. I'm not quite, actually, theoretically, if we were going by the third week, I would be a little bit ahead right now. I'm on page 218. So I've got about 60 pages before I finish. So I should be ready for our chat next week, if that's going to, of course, come to fruition. So, and we'll basically wrap up the book then. We'll probably take a week just to figure out what's going on with the next one. So I may start posting this week. That way we can maybe announce our next book 2 weeks from now. So yeah, I went ahead and marked quite a few pages, like I said, about suffering, virtue, and afflictions and things like that. There was a large section I got through, really the last, I don't know, maybe 15 pages, a lot of it about prayer. Although I found it interesting, like none of it really stuck out to me enough to mark through. So we have had some really good sections on prayer throughout the book already. But this latest passage on prayer really didn't speak too much to me in regards to, highlighting it and note taking and whatnot. So, but I'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, about 220 right now. So I got 60 pages. So we'll be able to finish this up in the next week. I'll probably start making a post to see what else people might be interested in reading for the coming weeks. So we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'll keep an eye on the participants here. I haven't seen anybody trying to hop in, but we'll go ahead and do what we did last week, and hopefully someone will hop in. So to start, I'm on page 162, just a little bit ahead. I think I ended on 137 last week. There wasn't much in between on those 30 pages that stuck out to me too much to discuss. So I'll go ahead with 162 here, where we talk about virtue. So let's see what we have here. I'll try and condense some of these a little bit. I did mark longer sections. There were really great explanations through some of these, and maybe I should start highlighting the really essential parts, but I usually just kind of make little dots on the end of what I think is relevant. So I may start highlighting stuff for the really important things that I want to make a really good mental note of or to repeat here on the stream. So the second reason is that in making such resolutions, we mostly have in view the beauty of and radiance of virtue, which attract our will, however weak and impotent it may be. And so naturally, the difficult side of virtue escapes our attention. And he goes on, talks about how it stands out and strikes the eye, for the path of virtue is by its nature hard and is hardest of all at the first step. So of course, he talks about how the man who decided to enter upon this path today, he needs to feel support for carrying out his decision. There's several moments in here. Maybe I'll hit all the virtue stuff and then I'll come back through and talk about some of the other things. So that was a great precursor to what I found through 184 and 186. Really great pages here. He kind of actually really follows it up. I don't know why there's really 20 pages between this, but he says, if you wish to always to press forward on the path of virtue without stopping, you should pay great attention to things which may serve as chances for acquiring virtue and never let them slip out of your hands. Let's see. Yes, meet them with a good will and resolve to submit to their unpleasant effect on you, but at the same time, prepare yourself to suffer with them with unshakable calmness of spirit. Otherwise, you will never learn patience. Let's see, you must not avoid it. On the contrary, you must undertake it without digging in your toes and must do and finish it through as though it were the most welcome work, never letting your heart be troubled by it, especially by the thought that were it not for this business, you would be completely at peace. He actually goes on in this next section, I think I'm going to read here, talking about how actually might be a little bit later with the affliction segment, but talks about how a man may make excuses and stuff through his sickness and through his troubles and afflictions and things, that he makes all these excuses essentially that he would be doing these other things like going to church or writing or improving the world, but he's got these afflictions. So I think it's kind of an interesting tie-in here. Otherwise, you will never learn to bear the afflictions you will meet, nor will you find the true peace you seek by running away from such things. Really great. I mean, there's similar paths, right? That actually he's going to uncover that here, but you achieve those virtues and things like patience and humility, which he talks about specifically, through afflictions and hurdles and obstacles, troubles and things like that. So, and of course, he discusses how God will allow some of those things to happen to you so that you can learn to rely on him. I don't know necessarily that some of these things are sent by God. I think David and I have talked about that before, that sometimes I think life happens and God is there, but I don't know that he specifically puts every obstacle in your way. So it's one of those life philosophies I'm still fleshing out and trying to understand. I don't know how that whole thing will work, but on 186, having formed a desire to gain virtue, you have, of course, prayed God to grant it to you. And in praying it, you could not avoid praying also for the methods and means of acquiring this gift. Very important. God does not give, for instance, the virtue of patience without afflictions, nor the virtue of humility without humbling occasions of degradation and dishonor. I thought those were great, not just, I don't know how else you would acquire humility, but that he will allow you to experience degradation and dishonor. Kind of made me think of like the entire ethos behind the sort of Japanese history where you've dishonored the family. But in a way, experiencing that can teach you humility that is incredibly important. Let's see. Oh yeah, I thought this was beautiful. I had never really thought about it like this. So after your prayer about these virtues, he sends you corresponding opportunities. What are you doing then in running away and avoiding them? You reject God's help for which you prayed and mock the gift of God. Really fascinating perspective. That was one of those moments, like David and I have talked about, that I really paused on it for a bit and was like, man, a lot of times we just pray for the trials and tribulations to be over. Whereas really as Christians, we should be praying for moments to be closer to God and express our faith and get deeper. And, as we figure out the truth and as we learn about stuff in books like this, that we'll be able to apply it. And we are given those opportunities. And do we squander them, or do we really end up just trying to pray our way through it and just say, like, get me through it, get me through it, get me through it, instead of realizing these are the moments to practice. And this is one of those things that I really do think as we get closer to the end times, really, I think we see the marks of the beast all around us with your Social Security card, your birth certificate, your bank accounts, your tax IDs, all kinds of stuff that they're, accordingly, there seems to be one big one that comes, but we see stuff even now that shows that you are part of the beast system. And I think that these are those trials and tribulations where your faith is strained and tested. And if that makes sense, that, what good is your faith really if you don't have time to put it into practice? And I know people always talk about like, oh, you can't just be a Christian in the good times, but really the being of the Christian comes with this warfare, with stuff going on in your life. You have to experience really tough stuff sometimes in order to, again, I don't know if it's God necessarily sending it to you, but in those moments you start to realize, like, do I really believe what I say? Am I really willing to put it all on the line? Would I really die for this? Are my beliefs changing just because these times are harder and those times are easier? So if you really are going to wake up every morning and put on the armor of God, you have to be ready to use it, and you also have to be trained in it. It's not just like a goofy saying. You really do have to understand those and establish those. And I've got people close to me that have told me there's people with really good lessons on the armor of God. Of course, just reading scripture is a great way to get those mantras into your brain. And he covers that a lot with the prayers here. There's like 24 prayers he talks about at one point, that reading those, getting them to sink into your mind so that when you go through these trials and tribulations, your brain almost can go like I hate to say on autopilot, but it flows into your brain, and you can feel that calm and that peace and strength because you've got those spiritual weapons inside, just a big old roster of things like, oh, you know what would be great right now is a prayer for this that I've got memorized, or that you can at least use as like a template in the bones, the skeleton of what you need to express. So I think fervent study of scripture, or even just things like this, like I've kind of stopped reading my Bible the last month or so and have really leaned on this quite a bit, which maybe is not proper, but it's been really helpful, especially because he quotes so much of scripture in this anyway, which I really appreciate. Some of it is just like really small segments, a lot of Psalms, Proverbs, things like that. But it does help to go through some of these, especially as I've marked these up and whatnot. And like I said, some of these I really did sit down and go, oh my gosh, I'd never considered that stuff before. Let's see what else we have here. 186. Yeah, 188 for, that's pretty much what I have on all of the virtues. There's just so many sections scattered throughout here about virtue that were really great. So I was happy to kind of tie those together. I'll go through some of these other stuff. Like I said, it's kind of tied in quite well with the sickness and afflictions, because that seems to be where we start to learn those virtues. Like he said, humility, you learn it through dishonor and degradation. And patience, you learn through troubling times, or even having a kid, or a tough job. And there's people close to me that have had a reasonably difficult time figuring out what to do for work or to stay at a job that they like. And I think it really is, it can be a great testament to your ability to stick with something that you chose to, or putting a time limit on it and say, I'm going to be here 6 more months, or I'm going to be here for 180 days or whatever. That's 6 months. That's 6 months. But really, like, I set out to do this thing for X amount of time. And really, you kind of have to trust again God's plan anyway. But sometimes you can say, okay, like I have a goal, and I'm going to do this. I'm going to stay with it, even when it gets difficult. I'm going to stick by this. And I think there are certainly times when it can become unreasonably hard, and you kind of know, like if you're really in tune spiritually, and you're connected to God and you're praying about stuff, you'll know when it's time to leave something that's no longer like a training ground for you to grow spiritually, but it really is something that you have to back out of. So relationships or whatever that is. But yeah, 168, 169. Yes, and I won't read all this because I've marked quite a bit of this. For example, if a sick man is disposed to bear his illness with a good heart and does so, the enemy, knowing that he will thus become well grounded in the virtue of patience, attempts to disrupt this good disposition. So here, of course, with the illness, he's being taught patience. Like I said, there is a certain crossover here between those things. Let's see. And then, yeah, like I said earlier, he would have been able to go to church, to talk to people, to read, and to write for the instruction of his brethren, and so on. If he notices that such thoughts are accepted, the enemy introduces them into the man's mind more and more often, multiplies and embellishes them, and evoking regret that the man is tied hand and foot by his illness. And I've really kind of been experiencing that lately. And it's like, oh, can I go do that thing? Can I do even just these menial tasks where, I need to clean something or cut the grass, or like he says here, just going to church. And it looks like such a tall mountain to climb when you have low energy or pain, or you have things going on outside, the drama or whatever that you have to deal with. Those things can seem like a lot at once. And I do wonder, as I did wonder as I read this and I thought about it, like, am I really just embellishing them, or really is Satan kind of stirring that up in me to embellish those things? And then later on, is there regret? Thinking that, oh, I missed out on these opportunities because of a tummy ache, even though these things can, like I said, sickness can not only just be pain, but it can really drain you of a lot of things. I mean, I know people have autoimmune diseases or cancer or whatever, things that make you totally bedridden, and every chore and every step can be just pain. So let's see, where did I go from here? Yeah, let's see, it carries on to the next page. Here we go. Thus, the former good-hearted patience is upset, and instead of a medicine sent by God and a field for practicing the virtue of patience, the illness presents itself as something hostile to the work of salvation. Let's see. Here we go. Having led a man thus far, the enemy robs his heart and mind of the good purpose for which he desires to get well, and leaves only the desire of health for the sake of health, forcing him to look irritably at his illness, not as an obstacle to good, but as an evil in itself. And I found myself struggling with this over the last couple of months where I see it and I'm like, all right, I've learned the lesson. It's time to move on now. And I think that's those moments of hubris and pride that clearly are not teaching the patience and humility that they should. So, or at least I'm not allowing it to. And I'm really not trying to make this all about me. I'm the only person speaking right now, but I know that sometimes your body just has to cleanse or it has to detox, or, things are shifting and changing as you get older. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that can happen internally that you can't actually see and that you can't put a name to. You can describe something that feels like it's the end of the world for you and has changed so much of your life. But then when it comes out of your mouth, you're like, I don't know, a headache. You know what I'm saying? Like if you have those migraines and it's like blinding and you can't see and you can't move or whatever, or you have people have like vertigo, right? They're just standing there and you're like, you good? Oh yeah, I just like need to sit down. You know what I'm saying? That those kinds of things are kind of funny. Or like I have a tummy ache when it's really bad, but to someone else on the outside, it's like, really, your stomach hurts. So let's see. As a result, impatience, not tempered by good thoughts, takes the upper hand and passes to complainings, thus depriving the sick man of the peace he enjoyed through good-hearted patience. But the enemy rejoices that he has managed to upset him. Even just to be upset and vexed with your afflictions at that time it's like it can be just enough to sort of derail the path and derail the purpose of going through these things. And there's a lot of reliance on God. I've had moments these last few weeks where I've just gotten very angry and been like, but if this is supposed to, as I've read this, like, is this really supposed to be a moment that's teaching me and training me? What can I do? How can I rely on God? Where can I get back to the natural way? And really, as I've kind of dug into this sort of medical stuff more recently, there's so much information to cover. I'm trying to understand what is something that is happening, like pain. Is that the body getting rid of stuff? Or is that like, I've just done something that's it telling me, hey, you messed up? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it's like, let's say you're detoxing in some way and heavy metals or toxins or whatever it is are finding their way out. I know that's kind of almost the same thing, but it's like the delayed response, right? Wherever it's been held, it's been no problem. But now that it's finally coming out, is that causing an issue? Is that changing things? I say that it's not a perfect example, but I listened to this doctor was saying that with like heavy metals and stuff, when a woman gets pregnant and she's going to birth the child, her body releases muscle relaxants, and then those toxins or metals or whatever will free float then through the body or get into the bloodstream and find their way into certain organs like the thyroid, which is why a lot of women end up with issues, and other such places. But it's like you didn't have an issue before, but now that your body's going through something, or stress even, are things, chemistry changing and things kind of moving around. Also, is it like if you eat hot food or like you drink poison, your body's going to try and rip that out of there. That causes pain as well. So I think that my point being is that sometimes it's hard to distinguish. And what's the lesson to be learned here, I think, is really where I'm trying to get at with that, if that makes sense. Let's see, where I just go through 169. Yeah. Here, yeah, this is a great follow-up. 188 is fantastic. It's actually several good sections here. Excuse me. We have, so 188. This was tough. This was tough for me. I must add that God prefers us to endure afflictions coming from the evil nature of people, especially from those to whom we have done some good, rather than those which are the accidental result of unfavorable circumstances. And he asks, why? Because our native pride is more easily subdued and exterminated by the former, by somebody else, than by the latter because of just circumstances. And also because if obedience to God's will is the chief thing in our spiritual doing, there's no better way of provoking and manifesting it to a greater degree than in such cases. And yeah, I wrestled with that. It's either like your afflictions are, let's say you lose your job, the market or something like that. That can be tough. That can be really stressful. But you almost have like an abstract thing to attack or to resist attacking. Whereas if someone is to wrong you personally, stab you or lie to you or whatever, that's someone you really have to express the forgiveness for or to. You have to, even if they don't ask for it, you have to look at them and you have to realize that the stuff does happen in life and it's terrible. And people hurt others for the benefit of themselves. But those are the moments he's saying here where God is like, this is the big one. This is harder because you have to show love. You have to show trust in him. You have to wrestle with someone else doing something to you, especially if you've done right by them. That's what he says in here. It's especially from those to who we have done some good. Someone that you thought was a friend or a family member or someone that you loved. If they hurt you, turn their back on you or whatever, those are the ones that are the toughest to express these virtues to. I've wrestled with that for a little bit. Let's see here, 193 and 202. Great follow-ups, really great follow-ups. Yeah, it's just this is actually the first title. Can't really see it, but this is the first title I've actually marked. It was just such a great succinct point in and of itself. One should not desire too strongly to be free from the attack of afflictions, but should wholly abandon oneself to God's will. And this is just following up some of the other stuff we've chatted about here. But if you are enduring some affliction with thankfulness, pay good heed, lest your enemy succeeds in tempting you, or your self-love conceives a desire to be rid of it. And that's a really great follow-up to the other quote I just read, that, or your self-love, your pride, and that's going to be great on the recording. It really does show that you're putting yourself first as opposed to trusting in God for deliverance. It's just like more of like, okay, like I said earlier, I'm done with this now. I'm over it. So because you love yourself so much, you're willing to put the lesson aside just to experience comfort again. And he goes through several sections in here talking about, I think David and I talked about this last time, putting aside all of the not all, but a lot of the comforts and pleasures of the world. Simple things like really tasty food that's very expensive, sleeping on something that's comfortable all the time, wearing really comfortable linen clothes. I think he talks about like embroidered and jeweled and things like that. It's certainly a task that you can undertake to become less, I'm not trying to say, less dependent on those things, but also just less comfortable in general, where when true discomfort comes or someone harms you or obstacles come that are really tough, you're always a little bit more prepared because you've experienced some discomfort intentionally. In my other groups where we've done some of these business books or personal development books as well, a lot of them express the need for things like cold showers, what else, fasting, things like that, because it sort of trains your mind to accept those hardships. And you're also doing it to yourself. You're training in the way of discomfort. And that I found is incredibly valuable. I mean, for a while there, I was taking, I'd take like a hot shower and then flip it to cold for as long as I could, and then was working my way up to strictly cold showers. And as I was working through that, I was working on getting more time in an ice bath. And the first time I did it was just like cold water with a little bit of ice from the freezer. The second time I did it was with like a 22-pound bag of ice in a tub. The third time I found a bigger tub that I could actually stay submerged in, because I'm 6 foot and it's hard to stay in some tubs fully, which I think is why some people do it in those troughs. But anyway, the point being is that the idea was to train and just take 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 or 3 or 5 minutes in an ice bath to just experience the pain, learn to breathe, control yourself, keep your mind centered. And he, of course, talks about, like I said, just doing things like not eating really good food sometimes and just saying, this is sustenance. There are definitely times to enjoy food, and God has made food that is good and tasty just on its own. But, the ability to sit down and just have chicken and rice, and just say, this is going to get me through today. I have other things to focus on that are higher here. Um, that's, that I think is certainly more along the lines of what he's discussing here. Looks like we've got a comment. I'm sorry, one moment, everybody. Hey, Orthodox Mike Bear. Well, hey, I appreciate that. I won't be able to make this when I've watched this on YouTube. It's wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I will, of course, post this here. I was hoping to do this last one on Saturday, and I just got carried away with some things I'm doing this weekend, but hopefully I'll be ahead of that. Anyway, moving right along. Therefore, when your desire to be free of the affliction sent to you is not fulfilled, your patience gradually weakens and finally brings you to a state of impatience. Really powerful. I've certainly been there where it's like I said, you're over it. You're tired of it. You're like, all right, now you're actually practicing impatience as opposed to practicing patience. So a really great point here. The second is that from that moment, your patience becomes forced, whereas God loves and rewards what is given freely. Therefore, from that moment, although you will still have to endure from the mere desire to be rid of afflictions does not rid one of them, your endurance will be unrewarded. That was incredibly powerful to me. That moment when you finally release a little bit and just like, it's enough. That's when your endurance starts to take a hit. Slowly, it gets whittled away. You really do. You have to stay on top of it 100%. Stay focused in prayer, working to the solution, doing what you can, whatever it is, fasting or studying or whatever your affliction is. That was something I struggled with a lot in engineering school. It was just endless. It never stopped. We went to classes year round. And then later in the program, we would, instead of having like an off semester, we would alternate with a co-op. So I would do it in like fall, spring, summer instead of all just summers. But it seemed like it never ended for all of these things that I hated too. Just stupid electives, super hard classes that were not relevant to what I wanted to do. And it just seemed like it never ended. And I definitely, there were times where, especially in the winter when it was cold and dark all the time, and all we did was like homework and class and homework and class, I would just sit there in the car driving up to do homework with friends. And I would sit there and I would stare, and I would just be an hour late to our hangouts, and they'd be texting me, and I would just leave the phone off and be like, man, I'm out. Like I'm just zoned out. I'm burnt out. And those moments, if I had read something like this, I think I would have been a little bit more prepared to put endurance and patience at the forefront of my mind to, and even doing something as simple as I think about it now, as something as simple as keeping a calendar. I have a big calendar here, and just marking off the days would be enough to have a reminder every day of like, this one is behind me. I have tomorrow. I'm going to sleep even for 2 or 3 hours. I'm going to sleep, and tomorrow's another day. I'm going to eat food. I'm going to have moments of, the bright thing that kind of revives you a little bit. I'm going to see friends. I'll go to church at the end of the week. And then it's a week. You know what I'm saying? Now you've crossed out a whole week. Oh, now we've gotten through a month. Now we've gotten to the big test. Now we're past that, But really a lot of it for me was just getting through it. And I could tell you, by the end of my classes and stuff, oh my gosh, it was like the endurance was gone. It was like, where's Chegg? Who's the smart person? What's the bare minimum I can do? I found things that I really enjoyed doing and replaced the time with that energized me. But, just a lot of it was just like, what's the bare minimum? Can I just get out of this? And some of it, it's so funny. I don't have it here because I've not finished the book. This is my shelf of finished books, but except for this one right here, that's what I'm currently reading. I got into this energy storage class, and I weirdly enjoyed it. And I think honestly, it was the way the teacher structured it, the way that she did everything. And there was one point where I had to study something, and I enjoyed writing the paper. It was really weird. Sometimes I think you just kind of get caught in the right current, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And that was one of those reprieves where I was like, oh, finally, something I actually care about, surprisingly. And that kind of gave me some life in that semester as well. let's see, where were we? We were on 193. Yeah, the afflictions here. Yeah, it's just, I thought this was interesting. Hold on, let me find the beginning of the sentence here. But if you stifle and repel the desire to be free from your affliction as soon as it presents itself and abandon yourself entirely to the benevolent will of God, proclaiming your readiness to suffer even 100 times greater sorrows, should God wish to send them to you, then even if your present suffering lasts only an hour or less, God will accept it as the longest duration and will reward you correspondingly. Very strange concept. This one I chewed on for a little bit, and I still am. That if you promise God, I will go through this for as long or longer than I need to in order to prove my fealty to you and my trust and my patience and my dedication to the lesson. Um, it may only last an hour, but God will consider it all of your sentence, essentially, that you were ready to commit to. Really strange, a really strange concept that God can pull you through it and say, you know what, you were prepared. It kind of reminds me of like the story of Abraham, where he's supposed to sacrifice his son and he goes all the way to doing it and the angel has to stop him. And it's like, you've basically done it. You've committed, you were going to do it, you weren't going to hold back. And it's a strange story in and of itself, but I think the concept is fairly similar. Like God says, okay, I get it. You trusted me, you were going to go through with it. You don't have to. It's over. The tribulation is over. The lesson's been learned. Really odd. That one really stuck out to me. I thoroughly enjoyed kind of mulling that over. But there's a great follow up here with 200. How can you fail zealously to dedicate to his service alone every moment of your life by word, thought, and deed? I'm sorry. 202. I'll get back to that. That's what I was going to end on. 202. Here we go. Yes. At the end of this prayer, he talks about, he goes through, what is it on prayer here? What's the segment? It's just literally on prayer. But he talks about the Jesus prayer later. Here he says, at the end of this prayer, you can enumerate all of your present needs, those of the spirit, soul, and those of the body. And if at that time you are exercising yourself in some special virtue, patience or humility or whatever it is, mention it too and pray for God's help to make progress towards perfection in it. Here we go. If you suffer some injustice or injury, some loss or affliction, do not forget to give thanks for it to God, since being sent in accordance with God's will, which is always good, it is visiting you for your own benefit. And I thought that was just a seriously great tie-in from the last one I just read about not shying away from these afflictions and not getting angry or impatient. He's saying, don't even stop there. Thank God for the affliction. Thank God for your tribulation. That can be really tough depending on what you go through, loss of a family member or, like debilitating sickness or you lose a limb in war or whatever it is. But to turn your anger, the heat of your anger from God and say, you know what? Somewhere along the line, this is going to be beneficial to me. It is visiting me for my own benefit. Thank you. And you really have to do it preemptively. You almost have to trust. I mean, you do have to, not almost, but you're trusting ahead of time that something is going to come out of this, that God is going to use you or use that affliction somehow to your benefit, even though right now the pain is so strong and loneliness or whatever it is can be so strong that you say, you know what? You are the king. You are the creator and the source of all things. This will be for the best. And I know in the moment that can be super hard. And that's a very forward, wise way of thinking. Looking, as you look directly in the face of whatever pain it is and saying, you know what, I'm above this. God is above this. Whatever I'm feeling right now, I'm gonna feel it, and then we're gonna overcome this and we're gonna say thank you. Wild. He is being sent according with God's will. See, like I said, I wrestle with that because there's an earlier part in here where he says God will allow you to go through things. And I didn't quite mark that here, but talks about how, God doesn't wish evil to happen upon you. I wish I'd marked that quote, but said God doesn't wish evil to happen upon you, but he allows people to exercise their free will. It was something along those lines. I wish I'd marked it now, but God's not going to kill your child just to teach you a lesson, but life happens. And, as David and I've talked about, like cancer and things like that, they come up, it's a very real possibility that you could end up with, get hit by a car or lose a dog or whatever it is. And it's not that God wants you to feel pain, but he understands that when you go through the pain, you can rely on him and be stronger. And that really does bring me to my final page here about conquering this stuff. I really thought this was just a great, even though it was kind of buried in here, it's just a great way to end this week and go into the next one as we kind of figure out what the end of this book is going to bring us. Like I said, it's in the part I'm at right now. It's kind of dry with the prayer, but I thought this was just beautiful. How can you fail zealously to dedicate to his service alone every moment of your life by word, thought, and deed? Moreover, you must not forget the profit we ourselves gain from such a service, since it makes us masters of ourselves, conquerors of the devil, and sons of God. And I really thought that was beautiful. It reminds me of a song from this Christian hardcore, like metal band, Impending Doom, really Christian name, that it's called More Than Conquerors. And I think, where is that? Is it Romans? I don't remember what passage it's in, but it talks about how, or maybe it's Psalms, that we are more than conquerors. Man, I wish I remember what passage that was. But it's a really heavy song. It's a really good one. If no one's into metal, you wouldn't like it, but any metalheads out there would thoroughly enjoy the song. Or you probably already know it because it's a classic in that genre, More Than Conquerors by Impending Doom. But that I really appreciated this. You must not forget the profit we ourselves gain from service to God. I'll preface it with this. You should keep always a lively striving to serve God only in all things that you do, and serve him in such a way as is acceptable to him. So he talks about just the service to God, and even by going through pain, curses, wounds, we become masters of ourselves, which is really what I'm in this book club for. Is this a lot, like I said, personal growth and business development. It's about becoming the master of myself. It's not about just like reading this stuff and chucking it on the shelf. I've mentioned before books like As a Man Thinketh. What else is good here? What else have we been through that's really along those lines? As a Man Thinketh was one I did on my own, but there's just a lot of stuff. We've covered, business books, money books, all kinds of stuff, but it really is getting to the heart of who I am as a man, as a Christian, as someone that's one day going to be a husband and father and things like that. It's just important to know that. I'm trying to just look on my shelf to see if there's anything else really in here, but like, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, things like Mere Christianity are fairly similar to this, actually. Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday is pretty good on this, but it's just about, like I said, becoming the master of myself. So there's another book, Mastery, by, I think it's by the guy that did 48 Laws of Power. I could be wrong about that, but that one is one that's touted all the time in the sort of men's circles on YouTube and self-improvement and things like that. Mastery is supposed to be a really good one. Yeah, I think that, and Conquerors of the Devil and Sons of God. There's a trifecta there. Like, we're being the best us, we're beating the devil, and we're still in service to God. So I think that's a great place to wrap up for this week. Like I said, I think it's a great intro and segue into the next week. Like I said, I really have just a few pages until I end up in part 2. So part 2 starts on page 223, 225-ish. And talks about things like the Eucharist and other stuff. So this will be new ground for me to cover for sure. Talks about temptations and things like that. I think it'll be great. I don't know exactly how this ends. I'm curious to see if there's a tie-up. I thought it was really funny when we went through Libido Dominandi. It just ends on a quote. He doesn't like have an ending paragraph that puts, the way a teacher explained to me a long time ago was, when you're writing your essays and things, you have to have all your parts of a frame of a picture. You have to have your introduction, you have to have your supporting arguments and things like that, and then of course your body of whatever you're writing about, material. But then you also have to have a conclusion that keeps the picture in the frame. And I thought it was so funny that Vito Dominandi just ends on a quote. It doesn't end with his like thesis in a paragraph. It just cracked me up. So I'm curious to see how this ends. And it was a great quote. It's a great way to end the book, but it's just funny to me. So I'm curious to see how this ends and what if it ends kind of dry and abrupt like that, or if it really does kind of tie some things together. This whole book is mostly the segments that I marked through are really great summaries of a large chunk. So it's not like I need like an inspirational Instagram quote, but sometimes you just get through a paragraph and you're like, whoa, that really encapsulates the whole idea that you've been talking about for 5 or 6 pages really well. So I hope you all have enjoyed this talk. If you've listened to this, thank you so much. I occasionally look at the view count just to see if anybody's paying attention to this. So if you have seen this, thank you so much. And thank you for tuning in 2 weeks in a row. Hopefully next week, we'll get some more people in here. Like I said, I know when we started this out, I had a whole plan. We had some pretty good momentum. And then I was just gone for 2 weeks and it's probably just derailed this. So I'll make some more posts. I got to get some more quotes and things like that. I got to get some more, what am I trying to say? Heads up on things like this. Doing it a couple hours before, I think probably isn't very helpful to anybody. So I'll try and be better about that. Make sure that we give everybody ample time and reminders and things like that. And then of course, maybe next week we'll start discussing what book we're going to find for June, July, as we kind of unstructure this a little bit. I've thoroughly enjoyed this week because I have not felt the pressure of trying to finish X amount of pages. I've done pretty well. I read it morning and night for sure. So it's been a great way to start and end the day, and I'll be happy to continue doing so. So I hope everybody has a great week. Like I said, if you watch this, thank you so much. I appreciate it a whole lot. And hopefully we will see you soon, and we'll get someone like Orthodox Mike Bear to chat next time. So thanks, guys.